Okay, welcome to the January 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Lenox Selectboard. Announcements from the chair is the first thing on the agenda here, and I'm going to turn this over to Dave Roach right now because he has some words to talk about a great lady who passed away this week.
So the town lost a great lady in Susan McNitch who passed away yesterday at BMC. She had been ill, but she had only been in the hospital for a day. She was a close friend of mine, certainly, since childhood, and she and her family ran an extremely successful business here in Lenox, Eastover, since the 1940s up until the 1990s. And, you know, she will certainly be missed. She was the first woman selectman in the town of Lenox, and she served for a number of years here, very effectively, too, a very effective selectman. Susan and I didn't agree politically very often, but that's just fine. We were really close friends. We did horseback riding together for 40 years with our families, and you know, I'm going to miss her, and certainly the town's going to miss her. I know Ed's known her too, maybe not quite as long as I have, but for a long time.
Long time.
Yeah. So our condolences to the McNitch family, and if there's anything the town of Lenox can do to assist you, please let us know. Thank you.
Yeah, she was a great lady.
Oh, the only other thing
citizen.
is the funeral's going to be at Church on the Hill, 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. And the obituary should be in shortly.
Yep. Thanks for that, Dave. Yeah, she was just a wonderful lady. I loved her. She was, a great family. Just always bubbly, always nice.
Yeah.
But, she did the job here. She was really a good select board member. But I'll miss her also. Great lady. Okay, next up is Citizens Open Forum. Anybody here to address the board?
I think we're going to take the minutes first or what?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, next is acceptance of the minutes of December 20th.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes of December 20th. Yep.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we'll get into Citizens Open Forum. Anyone, Lenox residents here to wish to address the board for your allotted time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Would you like to read that?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The consent agenda, a donation acceptance request for the community center, and a one-day wine and malt license for Canyon Ranch, for a meal with the guest chef at Canyon Ranch on Friday, January 26th, and Saturday, January 27th. Did you want to put a hold on that because we have somebody here that might talk about it, or what?
Is there somebody who wants to talk about it or anything?
Just to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, then in that case, we'll put a hold on it. And a one-day wine and malt license request for Robin Lane for a baby shower at St. Anne's Parish Hall. And a side note, the certified tips bartender will be none other than our own Ed Lane, who has become certified.
Big hold.
I would say
We got to talk about that.
it may be questionable as to whether we should approve this or not. Yeah. So let's approve the consent agenda as presented with the exception of the hold.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So does anybody have any questions for Mindy about Canyon Ranch? I do. I have one. Why don't you get a liquor license?
We are exploring it,
Okay.
so I might be coming back to the board in the next couple months with that. But we are not moving into a direction that we would serve it on the menu. But we do usually use an outside caterer, like we use Berkshire Catering, or we've
Sure.
used Dare and Kelly's and Me James. So we're maybe at the point that we'd like to just do it ourselves. So we're gonna dabble in this for January.
Sure. Okay. That's a good answer.
I mean, from my perspective, this is just a random comment, but I mean, having experience staying there, even though I live here, just because it's a wonderful place, I mean, it felt kind of programmatically sort of not the direction that your sort of health and wellness
Yeah.
focus was, but I can also see that it's probably not a radical departure because you have events and other things, so I don't think anyone's gonna go, oh my God, they got a liquor license.
Yeah, and we know that the guests.
Sure.
I'm
No.
sure.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the one-day liquor licenses for Canyon Ranch.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'll recuse myself from the next one.
Oh, yeah.
We already approved that, I think.
We did?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did.
No.
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
We did.
So,
We messed
Oh,
this
no,
up.
you heard it the same way I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well,
I apologize. I absolutely messed this whole thing up because everybody else wanted to talk.
I'll move that we approve the
I have that
one-day wine and malt liquor license for the baby shower at St. Anne's Parish.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I recuse myself. So next is, we're going to general business, so we're going to step up our game now. So we have a public hearing, the proposed submittal of a FY24 CDBG grant application for Lenox and Lee is provided, to provide housing rehab services. So if the clerk would read the notice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Lenox Select Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024, at 6 p.m. at the Lenox Town Hall, 6 Walker Street in Lenox, Mass., to discuss the town's fiscal 24 regional CDBG application, including housing rehabilitation, serving residents of Lenox, Lee, and Lee. Residents from both towns are invited to participate, and any person wishing to be heard will be afforded the opportunity. Written comments will also be accepted and considered and must be submitted to the Select Board by January 2nd, 2024 at 5 p.m. For additional information or questions, please contact Cassie Boyne Barsh, Grants Administrator, at 413-258-7055, extension 1.
Okay, so we got a motion to open a public hearing.
So moved?
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, who's here to talk about this?
So I am. I'm Dawn Lemon.
You have to get, it's just for the,
People at home.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's not, it's for the people at home.
Oh, okay.
The mic is just.
Great. So I'm Dawn Lemon, and I'm from Berkshire Community Development, and I've been managing the housing rehab program here in Western Mass for the past 5 years. I can tell you that the FY 22-23 grant that just was awarded, we just began working on it in December with 170 pre-applications. And this is for the town of Lee and Egremont. There's also a separate grant for Great Barrington, who doesn't have quite as many pre-applications, but the interest is huge. The pre-apps actually went out for the town of Lee through a mailing last spring. So I have been in contact with many Lee residents for over 9 months who have been patiently waiting. And I just said, I want to help you, but I'm waiting for the governor to make her announcement. But I have received several phone calls from the surrounding areas, including Lenox, for interest of why am I not included? Why can't I apply? And I said it's up to the Board of Selectmen. So I am just here representing Berkshire Community Development, but I know that Cassie and Alice can't be here either, so I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I don't have any questions. I'm one of the proponents of this particular program, having worked on it in the state of California for a number of years. But I would like to say that this grant application, this grant affords the opportunity for homeowners in Lenox to get up to $50,000 in a grant to improve health and safety issues in their home, everything from a roof, doors and windows, flooring, electrical, their plumbing, their insulation, a new septic system. There are a myriad of opportunities that an owner-occupant would have in applying for this program. What we've done so far with Cassie's help is we have posted this flyer around town. It's in the library, it's in the community center, it's on the first floor of Town Hall. I'm also going to be posting it, I had another great idea as to where to put it. and it's just flown out of my
Did
head.
you say the post office, library?
The post office, that was the other place. Yeah, the library's got it.
Did you say your website?
You give me one, I'll put it
Sure.
in Lenox, yeah.
Okay, oh,
Do
yeah.
you
Lennox
do,
Hill
does
Post Office.
Lennox do an e-blast to residents?
We do.
That's also an excellent
Yeah.
way to get the word out.
And I think we'll probably, with the approval of the select board and town manager, put it in the water bills maybe in the spring.
Wonderful.
And that would be a good way to circulate it if possible.
We might be post-deadline by that point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not really
March-
sure.
March 25th, I
Is there-
think is that
Did you
the,
mention website? Is there a lot of places to put it?
We have also posted this on the Affordable Housing Trust website, so that you can just pull it off of that, make a copy, fill out the information, and bring it into the land use office. We're collecting all of this information, which is simply name, address, and email, and phone contact information, the size of your household, some short questions as to whether your home is your primary residence and you're the homeowner, and then the different issue areas you would like this program to address, and they're all listed on this single sheet of paper. Very simple. What we're just looking to do is to compile a waiting list so that we go into this application process with a very long list of applicants so that we look more competitive, as Dawn just mentioned. They've got a current waiting list of over 170 households. So the more robust our waiting list, the more competitive our application will be.
Well said.
That all sounds very good.
Yeah.
I was thinking, when you mentioned the website, now I don't know if, to me, I use the town website all the time to find things. I don't know if that's representative of most people, but Affordable Housing Trust is a natural conduit, but it almost feels like it deserves its own tab or link or something because it's not just that. It's
Sure.
I have to, can I just chime in for a minute? I have to say I agree with you only because I know on other town websites, residents get confused. Is it the affordable housing or is this a separate grant or whatever? So I'd have to agree to have a separate page or just make it very clear that it doesn't have to do with the affordable housing. So people aren't calling the affordable housing whether there's a chair or members to inquire.
more important, I was thinking people might not click through to it,
Oh, right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, maybe we could do the red banner.
Because this stands for,
That's perfect.
it does more than just, we of course really support affordable housing, but it applies to more than just that, so.
Right.
so I have a question. I think I misspoke earlier when I mentioned March 25th. I think that's our application deadline to.
So I believe that is Bailey Boyd's application deadline.
Right.
So realistically, if I could speak on behalf of them, and I don't hold this to me, but I know my stuff from the subgrantee is due March 1st.
Okay.
So I would try to get it in mid-February, and I'm happy to do whatever you guys need me to do as well,
Great.
as far as pre-applications.
Great, thank you very
And
much.
that's for the individuals actually applying to the program.
The pre-applications, literally takes 60 seconds to fill it out, and it's just a name, an address, an email, and a phone, and just check off boxes of how you would utilize the program. And that way, that's saying, I'm interested in the program, I would like more information, I need to fill out a full application once we're funded, but it at least gets them in the door on a waiting list, per se, to say, I'm interested.
Yeah, this is the pre-application.
Yes,
Essentially,
did Allison,
yeah.
Cassie?
Yes, they emailed this to us. So again, this is currently in the library, in the community center, downstairs in the land use office on the first floor of Town Hall, and also out in the hallway. But I can certainly make it available, and it can be distributed to both of the post offices, which would be a great place for it too.
How about the Council on Aging?
Council on Aging is in the community center, but thank you, yeah. And I'm going to be going over to have little sit-downs with the Council on Aging when they have their luncheons over the next 6 weeks. I'm going to go in a couple of times because I'm sure we'll get a little bit of a bump the first time, and then people will tell their friends, and then more people will want to know. So I'm going to try to do that at the community center and at the library in the next 6 weeks.
Okay, and I'm happy to join if that's something you would like me to
Okay,
do.
great, thank you.
Maybe this was said and I missed it, but what's the process? The people fill out this application, then it's ranked somewhere somehow.
Do you want
What's-
the full process?
The Reader's Digest version.
So yes, so residents would fill this out now. My guess is it's going to you to give to Bailey Boyd, who
Correct.
is the grant administrator. Once the governor makes her announcement that the funds are available, the subgrantee will then reach out to everybody that has filled out a pre-application in the order that it was received, and provide them with a full application, more information. And at that time, it's a first come, first serve. So whoever returns the full application with the supporting documentation and the subgrantee income qualifies them, that's when they're saved a spot in the program. So I can just tell you, based on Lee's 170 pre-applications, it took me a couple days, but I sent out emails and followed up phone calls. It doesn't matter. I received some of those pre-applications in March from a mailing. I received some a couple days before. Whoever gets me back the full application is really who gets a spot. And I believe out of 26 projects, I, in the last month, sent out close to 20 acceptance letters. So there are people who are really on it. I mean, there was one woman, I swear I talked to her every day since March. That's how much interest there is in the program.
So people can't drag their feet, they have to.
They can't drag their
get it
feet.
done.
And I do have to say that there are a handful that think this is the application. I've already applied. And I said, unfortunately, the full application is very daunting, and it's not just one page, just being federal funds.
Yeah, I'll bet it is rather daunting. Yeah, but it has to be.
It has to be, and because I've done so many of them, I would like to sit with the applicants and walk them through it. You know, everyone's good at something different, and paperwork for some isn't.
Well, I, for myself, think it's a wonderful idea.
I do too.
Absolutely. One more question, if that's okay?
Go ahead, yeah.
So reading the application, I mean, it's to me, it seems clear it's a pre-app and whatnot. By the nature of the questions, I mean, we have some other issues relative to housing and who owns what here in town. But by the nature of the questions, whether you're a year-round resident, if it's a primary residence, you know, do you own the home or are you a landlord? It seems like there's preferential treatment given to people who own and live in their home versus...
It has to be your primary residence.
Okay.
And you have to be a full year-round resident.
I think would you suggest to go to the Council on Aging with this? Because I think that's an area they
It's
probably
definitely
should
an
use,
area.
is people that are in their homes, they're struggling.
are living
they can't-
off of Social
They can't afford it, they're living on
Security
Social
and-
Security, they can't afford to do some things. They'll keep them in their homes.
And who might not have access to the internet or be web,
Savvy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very important that, you know, I get over there and let people know that this
Yeah.
exists. And like I said, there'll be one round and people will get some information and then they'll tell friends and then there'll be, you know, interest, I'm sure, in a second one.
Yeah, and I know you'll be willing to help them if they need
Oh,
help along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you so much, Dawn.
You're very welcome. Does anyone else have any other questions?
No, that was well explained.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so I guess we'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, personal.
I thought you were fixing something.
Well, this is definitely a fix for the town.
Okay.
Kate McNulty Vaughn, 10 Post Road, and I'm delighted to actually meet Don Lemon in person. I saw in the Eagle some years ago the amount of millions of dollars that were coming into our communities here in Berkshire County, and wanted to know more about this program, and I happened to call and speak with you. And like what she's done tonight, between Mary Beth and Dawn, you're getting a really great intro to this program. And one of the things that, you know, that you've hit on here at the end is this notion that for a lot of older people, household improvements that are absolutely necessary, that are funded by this program. And one thing that Don had told me a couple of years ago was this idea that once the word gets out, you'll have no problem getting the waiting list. The first year is the hardest. So some of the communications part of this will be really important. I guess the other thing is this, that overall, this may seem like it's targeting folks who don't have the money. Well, what about me? I'm just over the amount or whatever. But what it does for the community is it keeps our housing stock in better shape than if, folks who just really couldn't pony up the money for these very expensive fixes, they get the assistance they need. And overall, that's a benefit to the community and our housing stock. So I just wanted to put that word in.
Kate, watch your step. Your shoe is untied there.
Well, I'm in a hurry to get to a basketball game.
Me too.
I'm not playing, clearly. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to say anything? So now we'll make a motion to close the
I
public.
move we close the public hearing.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So can we get a motion there?
Yes, you may. Mr. Chairman, I move to submit an FY24 regional CDBG grant for housing rehabilitations and to authorize the town manager or designee to sign the grant application and associated forms.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Done.
Thank you, Don. I
Thank you,
appreciate you
Don.
coming.
Thanks.
Contact me with any questions or anything that you guys need. I'm happy to meet the council on aging, do
Super.
outreach at the library.
Super. Thank you very much.
So nice to meet you all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next on the agenda, and we'll turn this over to Mr. Ketchen, is the fiscal year 2025 budget. Town manager will discuss the preliminary budget. And he has some slides for us.
Yes, I do. So pursuant to the Acts of 1991, Chapter 155, which is otherwise known as the Town Manager Act, the town manager is required to present a preliminary budget at the beginning of January to the board and to the Finance Committee. I want to recognize a couple of our Finance Committee members who are present, particularly Chairwoman Cass, also Ms. Moran, who've seen a earlier version of some of our financial projections. Just so, I think most folks in the room are familiar with this, but just for the edification of the audience, budget season begins in the fall, where we solicit with some instruction proposed budgets from the various departments. The budgets are reviewed internally, and then we produce a preliminary budget, which you'll be seeing tonight as a result of some decision-making on my part. And then we have the month of January to present a final budget that also gets reviewed by the Finance Committee. At roughly the same time, the school committee is working on their budget. They, of course, also have a preliminary budget presented by their superintendent that will be undergoing similar changes in the ensuing weeks. That is more or less what brings us to tonight and carrying forward for the next 30 to 60 days or so. So, the preliminary budget, the big picture here is we're looking at $34.7 million. It's relying on a $19 million tax levy. That is a 6.3% increase overall, and using what I think are very modest new growth figures, it would be a 5.2% net increase over a $200,000 new growth figure, which is far lower than what we've been experiencing in every year except the most recent one. We were at $207,000 for the current fiscal year we're in. So what that is that's again, for those not familiar with the concept of new growth, that's property that is being taxed for the very first time. Not to be confused with growth in assessments, that's a different thing. That's if you have a vacant piece of land that gets taxed, some amount, you build a house on it, the new growth is that portion of the tax bill that's attributable to the new house that was not taxed in the previous year. So Every year we get some new growth on the tax rolls. We're estimating $200,000, which would be the lowest amount of new growth that we've experienced in a very long time. So with that very conservative estimate in mind, we'd be looking at a 5.2% net increase on the tax bill, the amount of money we actually bill out. We are looking at greater reliance on local revenues, but we are, again, well below our very conservative estimates when it comes to what we rely upon in terms of our local revenue to fund our operating budget. And we'll get into some of those specifics a little bit later. The budget fully funds the request of the superintendent of schools for the school system. Right now, we're also looking at funding all municipal services that we currently fund. We're going to meet our retirement and benefits commitments. Berkshire County Retirement has assessed a 6.2% increase on the town over the current year. So this budget meets that obligation. And there's also several strategic initiatives and priorities that we'll be discussing later. We're assuming relatively flat, 2% state aid. We won't know that number for another few weeks. And we're continuing to, maintain our reserve levels at a very robust scale and growing even more next year. So where does the money come from? At $19 million, just a little over half of our revenue that we take to run the government comes from the taxation of real and personal property, also known as the tax levy. Local revenue and enterprise funds and state aid make up a substantial portion of the remainder, and free cash is predominantly used to fund capital projects as well as funding various other stabilization accounts. As well as we use about $300,000 to take the edge off of the tax rate. We did that some years ago during the pandemic when we set the tax levy at 0%. That was how we accomplished that, and it's remained in the budget ever since. And then community preservation, we're carrying a $1.1 million number. The applications have far exceeded that amount. Nevertheless, I've level funded because we don't know what the committee will do, and that's subject to its own surcharge. So it's money in, money out. It has no impact on the tax levy when it comes to funding the government. I will make a note that FY24, the year we're currently in, is the last year for payment on the library debt. So the library building will be debt-free just in time to go back into debt to fund some renovations.
Yeah. Well, CPA will, I think, make their final decisions on the 18th this month.
Right. So we'll populate some final numbers in here in advance of town meeting based on what that is. But as I said before, it's money in, money out from the surcharge, so it has no impact on the tax rate itself. So where does the money go? In Lenox, 48% of it goes towards the operating budget of the Lenox Public Schools. And then the rest is divvied up into a myriad of categories, most notably probably the general government, public safety, and enterprise activities. Enterprise activities are also money in, money out. We rely entirely and exclusively on user charges there. That is not legally what's required, but we do it here in Lenox as a matter of practice.
And this year will be the first year that will recognize the approved increase in rates for wastewater treatment.
Right. Though we do not have a bond to pay against yet, we've agreed to ease into the rates, bolstering our retained earnings in those accounts as a hedge against rate shock from future debt service. All right. So current reserve positions, as I mentioned, we certified free cash at $4.6 million. As of July 1st, we appropriated a substantial portion of that towards various stabilization and capital funds at the special town meeting back in November. our stabilization, our general stabilization fund hasn't been appropriated to in my 10 years as town manager, and I'm not suggesting that we change that. Nevertheless, it's grown from, a $600,000 figure to $724,000 as of the close of last fiscal year due to interest accrual.
Chris, could you just explain to our audience and everybody just how the stabilization fund works?
Yes.
When it could be.
So I'm personally not a fan of general stabilization funds, as folks who are familiar with a lot of the proposals that I've made during my tenure. I am a fan of specific stabilization funds for fire trucks, for debt service stabilization, ambulance, and things of that nature. But we had 650,000 when I started in general stabilization. We haven't taken anything out of that, but you're allowed by statute to maintain a general stabilization fund. And, if you want to, some towns call it their rainy day fund. As you can see, I think free cash serves as a perfectly adequate rainy day fund and has served the town well, which is why we don't appropriate towards our general stabilization. But we do appropriate to stabilization funds for equipment so that we can avoid borrowing for things like vehicles and things that have.
Or if there's a catastrophic thing happen, the proverbial roof blew off the school.
That's right,
You can use
yeah.
it for that.
Like Edgewood, remember Edgewood?
Yeah.
But-
Walked out there.
Given that, among those different reserve positions, there are different rules and restrictions in terms of your rate of return,
Right.
interest-wise.
Yeah.
And would you say, I think OPEB is probably the place that we can earn the most, is that correct?
That is correct. We appropriate anywhere from $250,000 to $600,000 a year towards our, so when we're talking about OPEB, we're talking about other post-employment benefits obligations. This is the health insurance that retirees receive post-employment when they retire. This was a liability that was carried for years in the government sector without folks knowing it because there was no requirement to report it. There's a fundamental rule of accounting. You want to account for all of the costs of a service at the time that it's rendered. A lot of communities still aren't doing it. They're reporting the unfunded liability on their balance sheet, but they're not making provision to pay those costs. Lenox has made much progress, measurably to the tune of $8.1 million to cover what is roughly a $20 million liability. And that's over an actuarial period of several decades, 30 years or so.
So the corollary question is, free cash is your least well-performing asset, more or less, is that correct?
But it is the one that we use.
I
and we
understood, and you have
deploy-
various stabilization funds, directed stabilization funds like we did for, like we approved in November.
Right. So we could certify free cash on July 1st and then redeploy that cash towards equipment and infrastructure improvements 5-6 months later at a town meeting. So which is relatively slow by a lot of financial terms, but in municipal world, that's a relatively quick turnaround.
I understand, I hate
Yeah.
to keep harping on this, but
Right.
generally speaking, for many years, interest rates were so low that it kind of didn't matter where we had different allocations of reserves, but now, given the regulations and what you're limited with free cash, there's choices to be made about what reserves are funded because of
Right.
how they might perform.
So that's a good point. Case in point, OPEB. It's the one trust where we're allowed to invest somewhat aggressively. So we've made the decision to take these assets. They're sitting entirely in the Public Retiree Investment Trust, or PRIT for short. It's the same investment portfolio that funds the pension system. So which has had substantial returns over the years, into the double digits.
It's the best one we're going to get.
It's the best one in municipal world that you're going to get. Combined enterprise retained earnings, 1.9, just shy of $1.9 million certified as of July 1st. And then we sit on a little over $4 million in what's called excess levy capacity. This is This is a creature of Proposition 2.5, which was the tax restriction that was passed in the early 1980s. You're allowed to grow your levy by 2.5% plus the new growth that we talked about earlier. But you're not allowed to go beyond that point without seeking voter approval for a override. Despite that restriction, Lenox, in the last 10 years, which may or may not be a coincidence, has grown from, I think around $100,000 in excess levy capacity to over $4 million. That's money that you could tax without asking the voters for permission, but you've chosen to essentially spend less. And tax less. It's bandwidth. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great. A lot of people see this number and say, oh, well, there's opportunity to spend. Well, but the only way to spend more out of this is to tax more.
Yeah.
So
You gotta pay for something.
you got to pay for it. So we've chosen not to. So this is a graphical depiction of the combined free cash and stabilization totals. I think 10% is always a pretty good target. So 10% of budget would be depicted by the green line that you see. As you can see, we're well above that. I think that's important for the impression that we give to the bond market, especially while we were debt free a few years ago in our general fund. We've made the intentional choice to go back into borrowing for some pretty big projects, and that's going to become even more important in the ensuing years when we go to bond the public safety building, as much as $25 million, the wastewater treatment plant as much as $45 million with hopefully substantial federal support. So I think this is, represents a posture in Lenox that is certainly favorable when it comes to the bond market and the rating agencies that judge the credit worthiness of municipalities. So with that segues into, as a financial metric goes, we're one of only 2 AAA rated communities in Berkshire County, the other being Great Barrington. Not altogether unrelated to our reserve position, as well as many of our other financial decisions we made over the years. Reserves are very strong. We have an OPEB plan. A lot of communities don't. We fund our OPEB plan substantially. A lot of communities don't. Capital, we've shifted from horizontal infrastructure to a stronger focus on our buildings. We continue to have a robust paving plan, and we replace water and wastewater pipes as well. We haven't taken our foot off the gas there, but we've recognized the need to focus more on our buildings. And we've actually started to see some investment over the last couple of years in a lot of our recreational amenities, playground equipment, parks improvements. There's proposals on the horizon for skating rink and other items that I think could benefit our town. Operating, we're continuing to maintain our core services as well as fund some strategic initiatives in this preliminary budget. So what does this actually accomplish? We're going to meet all of our current needs and fund a few others that we'll talk about soon. I just want to make it clear to the public, the preliminary budget fully funds what the superintendent of schools has proposed for the school department in FY25.
Can I
Yes, sir.
ask you about that? Given that they're, by far and away the largest component of our budget, we talk about this every year, and they're, I don't have the page up, it's 7%?
Yep, 7.2%.
So they are also currently undergoing a MSBA proposal, or,
Right.
attempted proposal. It says operating and capital budget requests. Do you, or has the finance committee parsed out how much of it's operating and salary and things like that versus capital, given that they're undergoing a parallel process to grossly improve their capital situation? Right. So wouldn't it be wise for them to hold off on anything but the bare minimum that necessary capital projects while they are in this MSBA process?
So I've asked a similar question, and the short answer is no. We haven't fully dove into the school budget yet, but it's my understanding, at least from an initial view, that special education costs are a big driver this year, perhaps more than others, and the $400,000 cash capital allocation that the town recommends to the school committee will certainly more than fund a lot of the analyses that are needed for those future capital improvements. That would be somewhat down the road, but as it relates to FY '25 in isolation, I think this statement is appropriate. I guess it's good enough for now, but.
So is 7 the new 3?
Oh, on an ongoing basis?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
They play ball with us for several years, at 3 or 3
Yeah.
point something, and
Yeah. I think. Let's see how the next month or so plays out. I think we'll have an opportunity to, assess the degree to which fixed costs and unfunded mandated costs are truly driving the increase in this particular year. That's what's been reported to me. I take all of that at face value for the moment at least. But there's a process that's more or less kicking off tonight that will.
I think Neil's pointing out a frustration that all of us have, and I realize it's early in the game, and there's a lot more to come with as we talk to the schools. But it sure would. I got in trouble for saying this. It'd be nice to have a lot of cooperation when the budget process is done with the schools and pencil sharpening. But there are some unfunded mandates that they have. I get that. We all understand that there's things that happen. We have to look at overall because it is half our budget.
And I have to say, that at least on a staff level, I feel like communication with the school department is very strong. So I expect we can work through a lot of these issues in the next few weeks.
I'll be
and
going
months.
to the budget hearings over the next several weeks and finding out, drilling down into all of this.
I'd like to encourage them to present us, in your general administration page, or just the culture page, you broke down $8,000 for the academy building, and they just go, operating budget, sped, boom. And it feels like they should break down some categories for us, since it's such a large number.
What, the $8,000?
No, not that, no. So I'm saying, other departments, like Chris, under general government, he's projected $18,000 to do an election next year. So he's given us 12
Yeah.
line items.
There's a little more granularity there, yeah.
School gave us 2.
And they have that granularity.
Right.
Also. so
In their
share it.
budget, yeah.
So, several years ago, I suggested that we look at the difference between retiree salary and new hire salaries as it affected the budget. And that's where we initially got the funds to start OPEB, the contribution to OPEB. And it since has sort of lost, its momentum. That process has sort of lost its momentum. But when a department asks for 5 or 6% in an increase in budget, is it because it's actually 5 or 6%, or is it something significantly more because their salary structure is significantly less because of retirees and new hires? So looking at the overall figure, which you guys don't do, you look at the particulars, you can see what's happening. Looking at the overall figure might be somewhat of a distortion as to what's really going on. So clearly, when you were chairman of the school committee, we worked on that with the OPEB thing. And we got a lot of criticism, but we got it through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, wasn't it?
It was a few years ago.
Yeah. But it got things rolling and it got things started. And I think we still need to pay attention to those types of things. Neil's pointed out some good thoughts as well. Yeah.
I mean, I think we do have to be aware that there has been a large spike in costs.
Okay.
With
Yeah, just in supply
inflation.
chains.
Yeah, with inflation and the supply chains have been disrupted for 2 to 3 years. And of course, there are also employment contracts that were negotiated at a point in time that, we are living with right now. So, as I said, I'll
We
be
can't throw
attending these.
stones because we were part of that negotiation.
I get it,
you know.
I get it.
And we've been here too long. So
Well, we
to
all,
blame
we
it on
all,
somebody else.
we all read the national news and
Yeah.
everything. This is everything.
Everything's going up.
Labor, I mean, we're so labor intensive, God.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's going up and it's not stopping. It's going up, up, up. Everybody's asking for whatever they can get, and we're facing the same thing that everybody else in the world is facing.
I mean, I think teachers are horribly underpaid. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think they're one of the most important positions in the town. But on the other hand, I think we have to keep an eye on what we're charging the taxpayers as well. So, it's got to be a balance.
So scale is an important thing to look
Right.
at, right? So, I mean, you look through the granularity of the budget, and you'll see line items that are, in some cases double digits, but the dollars are small, right? This is one example, and other large departments are examples where, a smaller percentage change has a much greater impact on the tax levy.
Right.
So those are all fair points, and it is something that we're cognizant of. I mean, we didn't go into this preliminary budget lightly by any stretch.
And the other thing is what we fought to do with some degree of success is keep parity in raises throughout the town. So to make sure that we don't appear to value one job more than another, that if people for a COLA raise were going to get 2 or 3%, everybody got 2 or 3%, or whatever the number was, everybody got it. Because when we first got here, they were way out of line. Depended on what department you were, your raise could vary significantly more or less than another department.
Well, that's true, but we have to pay competitive wages also, and that's
Well,
what Chris has been working on.
I'm talking about COLA, not the wage adjustment for competitiveness. We need to be competitive, that's for sure. Yeah.
So,
Move on.
okay, very good. What else does the budget actually do? So we're adding resources to our facilities maintenance and function, as well as our police department. So we've hired a facilities director that's partially funded in FY '24. We need to fully fund it in FY '25. And then FY '25 would be the last year of the multi-year plan to add patrolmen to the police department. So that is included in the budget. We provide funding in the compensation reserve account, which you'll see as a notable increase. That is intended to support the salary survey that you all have mandated upon me to complete by the close of this fiscal year. So we'll take a look at our comps. We'll do some analysis. That analysis will produce results that need to be actionable. In order to take meaningful action on that, I expect we will need a substantial amount of money to accomplish that. And I believe I've requested enough in the compensation reserve account to meet all of those needs, as well as the ongoing obligations for things like compensated absences, for training of cross-training when retirees are leaving, so that they don't walk out the door with their historical knowledge in their head, as well as the occasional desk audit where we reevaluate the nature of someone's work, and cost of living adjustments on top of that. So we'll meet all of the obligations that we've traditionally met through compensation reserve, as well as fund whatever the results of the salary survey dictate. One of the things that is not in compensation reserve is what I see as an immediate need to elevate the wages of part-time staff. So these are the folks who, primarily at the community center and the library, but also scattered throughout other.
Those are not benefited, unbenefited.
Right, that's correct, yeah. So we are, in my judgment, if we're not already uncompetitive, we're far less competitive than we were before the world changed. So I'd be looking to make that irrespective of the results of the salary analysis for the permanent full-time staff. The one thing that we also do with the budget is we're not going into local revenue, particularly on the lodging tax, to fund the operating budget in a way that will disrupt our funding plan for debt service stabilization. We still maintain easily enough headroom to fund on an annual basis until the debt payments start coming due, the transfer to the debt service stabilization account that we did last November.
That's an important thing that people have to realize, that we spent a lot of money in the last 2 years. We authorized a lot of money to be spent, and it has to be paid for.
Yeah.
And this is part of the plan, and we don't want to disrupt those projects.
So those excess lodging revenues are already going towards stabilization on future debt. And when those bond payments come online, we will transition from funding a stabilization account to paying off the bonds.
Didn't we take some out, did I read the motion to take some out at the town meeting this year, to stabilization fund?
To put in.
Set aside.
To set aside, yes. Yeah, that's what we're doing. This budget doesn't change our ability to do that.
Right.
Right, we're not declaring, to use a term of art in budget world, we're not declaring $4.1 million in lodging revenue.
Right.
We're declaring $2.2 million in lodging revenue to fund our operating budget, so that there's enough headroom in our expected revenue to fund the debt service stabilization fund in FY25. And when the debt service on the bonds that we issue in the future comes online, we'll be using those excess lodging revenues to pay those bonds without, having a minimal impact on the tax levy, to the tune of about $1.5 to $1.8 million.
Right.
We're not proposing to spend any of the settlement receipts to fund the operating budget. That's sort of a no-brainer, but I think it has to be said. This budget does not do that. And it also uses existing sources of revenue, in this case, free cash, to fund our ongoing review of the various and numerous and voluminous work plans that are coming out of this project. So here's what that looks like. I wish I had brought my laser pointer. It'd be a lot easier to explain, but I think most folks who've been around town meeting are familiar with this chart. So this is a look back at the last 2 years of the levy. The percentage tax levy increase is on the bottom gray line. We've typically, but dating back further than this, we were, 2.5%, 3%. 1 year we did 0.
Right.
But if you go back further than, say, 10 years, you'd see on a routine basis 5s, 6s, 8s. We've departed that, but because of inflation, we're sort of heading back into historically normal territory. You saw some precursors of that in FY23 and FY24. The preliminary budget is looking at 6.3. Now you're able to offset a fair amount of that through new growth, which is the second, the third line down. We're estimating 200,000. As you can see, that would be a low ebb compared to previous years. So the net effect of that would be around 5%.
Oh, we got to work to get that down. Yeah, it's too high.
I've said that myself on more than one occasion in the last 3 weeks.
I'm sure you have.
However, I do think it is important for folks to know that this is, this is not unlike our peer communities at all. What we've been doing for the last 10 years or so has been performing exceptionally below our peer communities, places like Williamstown, Great Barrington, even, West Stockbridge and Lee, Richmond, Stockbridge. We've, by far had the lowest levy growth historically. It's not something that, is intended to make you feel good about 6 1/3, but it is somewhat of a reality check that we're not at a fork in the road per se, but we've got some things moving forward that we want to accomplish, and a lot of those things are going to cost money in an environment that's already been pointed out is highly inflationary. So while this may be abnormal for us, it is not abnormal generally for most towns at any point in time. And it'll be curious. I don't feel like this budget in any way makes Lenox less competitive than its neighbors in terms of both the stability of the tax rate, or the effect that it has on the actual average bills that folks are paying. I have a separate.
So if we bite the bullet in 25 and we go up 50% on our levy increase, because we're taking a lot of one-time shots, yet in fiscal 26, it's not predicted to decrease a heck of a lot when we've already taken the shot. So I can understand going up. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But then why wouldn't, in subsequent years, wouldn't it be a little bit less because we don't have those one-time expenditures? You said we maxed out in patrolmen. That's probably $100,000 at least. So I mean, there's the one-time shots that we're taking, understandably bring our levy up another 50%. But subsequently, maybe they should start to slide down because we don't have those.
That may be. In fact, to be fair, I'm closer to your thinking than it may appear. I've increased the assumptions for the out years to numbers just because I don't know what else to work with since the economy is frankly so strange. Just to be hopefully overly conservative, I've bumped up the departmental growth rates to try and paint a more conservative and cautionary picture for the out years. But I have to tell you, I mean, I present this slide every year, and it was not abnormal to see 7 and 8s in the out years that we would subtly get down to 4s, 3s, even 2s.
And that new growth line is artificially low, and it may, just seeing what's going on.
Hopefully, yeah.
Right. I mean, but just seeing the development that's going on, that's going to come online in fiscal '25, that should give it a little bit of a bump.
Maybe. I don't think
At least in the commercial district.
taxpaying.
I'm talking about the commercial district.
Oh, okay.
The 2 new dealerships that are going to be going in.
I understand those things,
stuff like
but I
that.
also,
That's right.
I agree with your sentiments, Dave. I think, we are being conservative, and I'm not challenging any of the actual numbers at this stage. And in some ways, I mean, we have a very long-term payoff that we've been, with OPEB. Someday down the road, there's going to be a dramatic payoff for us that doesn't exist in other communities because we've made by far the largest dent in that unfunded liability. But I'll still say, though I'm not challenging the actual numbers, I feel that our goal several years ago was, and continues to be, better transparency and granularity of the budgets. I mean, I just went back to the, again, I apologize that I'm harping on the same thing, but the number one mentioned in the strategic plan for the schools that was completed in 2019 under finance was financial transparency and increased presentation and earlier presentation of the preliminary budget.
Right.
So if you've got a budget, how come the school department doesn't have their prelim 25 budget on their website?
Good question.
Given that that was a priority goal of the strategic plan, which we paid a bunch of money to some consultants to do. That's not like an accusation towards you. It's a rhetorical question in general that I think we should ask them to try to do.
Fair point, fair point.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on this slide?
I know you want to get through your presentation.
No,
I flipped through.
I enjoyed this topic generally.
We know you're doing. You do a good job.
Thanks. All right, so items remaining. So as I said at the beginning of this presentation, we've finalized the departmental budgets by the end of January. So you all have liaison assignments. We'll be sitting down with department heads to fine tune the operating budgets for each of the departments. It's in the top half of your cover page. The state aid and assessments will come at the end of January. Hopefully be presented at the MMA conference, which seems to be the audience that governors, both present and past, have chosen to disclose what aid would look like. I expect this year to not be any different from that. I think that's the 20...
It's like the 26th and the 27th.
Whenever that is, it's in the 20s.
Remember.
So we'll have that in advance of having a final budget. Health insurance rates will be set by Berkshire Health Group by the end of the month. So we'll have more clarity. I think I've used some fairly conservative estimates, but we won't really
keep our fingers crossed on that.
we won't really know until we get to the end of the month. So we have a new shared inspectional services department with the town of Lee, Stockbridge, and Great Barrington. That number will come to us. I think I've been, fingers crossed, I've been hopefully overly conservative, and if not, I'll use my one vote among 4 colleagues to try and make it conservative. And then final approval of the school budget, I think, will take place sometime in February at the school committee level, and then you'll have a water and wastewater rate setting hearing in the month of February. So that'll help clarify a lot of these figures that are in preliminary form in front of you right now. So this is a little bit of a rehash of what I just said. So the select board, the finance committee, which I think is already, your liaisons have already started to meet with department heads even before operating budgets were submitted. So if FinCom is fairly far along in their process, and then Berkshire Health Group, the state budget, all of those things will occur over the next several weeks and months. And then we'll make adjustments based on new information, and by May 2nd, we'll have a town meeting to appropriate the funds for FY25 if the voters are so inclined.
Oh, I was supposed to wait until now. My apologies.
I don't even know why I put these slides in at the end.
No, I'm good.
All right,
You did a good job, Chris.
Yeah.
all right.
Good job. Now we have to do our due diligence and all this, read this budget over, confer with Chris if you have questions or your liaisons, and move forward.
All right. So, that's the end of the first look. We'll have lots of looks as the calendar carries on. So I appreciate your time. I know it was a little longer than a typical board meeting.
Okay. So any new or old business we need to discuss? Anybody have any?
I don't think so. I think we're good.
We're good? So our next meeting will be January 17th, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.